Alrighty, Aeneid Book 9. Big shout out to all three of my subscribers. Very glad to hear from Miss Habik that you are watching these videos and thankful for them. Do let me know. I realise you can't do comments. I don't know, add me on LinkedIn, something like that, if you have any comments, queries, concerns, or just ask Miss Habik for my email address, that's fine. So, Book 9, let's go through some key events. So, quick reminder, Aeneas is in Pallanteum recruiting the Arcadians and the Etruscans. I assume, by the way, you have read Book 9, you've read David West's introduction. They're my two things that you need to do before you watch this video. So, Aeneas, he is absent from the war, and he's pretty much absent throughout this entire book. I will leave it to you to decide if that is a heroic act or good leadership. So, remember, he's in Pallanteum. Everything else is going down in Laurentum, so further down the River Tiber. Turnus can't get into the camp, so he's been warned by Juno / via Iris that Aeneas is far away. So he tries to attack the Trojan camp. He can't get in, so he tries to burn the ships so that the Trojans can't escape, and they're sort of then just trapped, and he can attack them. But the ship is holy, and the planks burst into nymphs. Remember this detail for later, they will come up again. So the Trojans are trapped in a town. This might be potentially triggering for them, given that they spent 10 years of a war being trapped in a city with people attacking them on the outside. Worth bearing in mind. So, Nisus and Euryalus, it's heartbreaking. So they volunteer themselves to go and give this message to Aeneas. Ascanius, Aeneas' son, and the elders gladly accept. They get praised. Nisus is offered loads and loads of geras if they're successful. Euryalus is offered friendship. That's nice, isn't it? Not quite as good as all of the horses and women, but never mind. So they get distracted by the possibility of slaughter and geras. Euryalus chooses an extra shiny helmet which catches Vulcan's eye, and they die in a glorious and ever so slightly homoerotic passage. The Latins stick their heads on spikes, and Euryalus' mum mourns so much that everybody else feels really quite awkward. She has quite an impact on the soldiers, and they feel very dismayed by her grief as they sort of think about everybody else's grief that they might cause at home if they die. Then we get Pandarus and Bitias. They get sick of being trapped, and they open the gates, even though Aeneas told everybody to stay inside. They let Turnus in. He causes chaos and eventually jumps into the river to escape. And Ascanius, he gets his first kill. We're going to come back to that in a bit. That tiger is there because Turnus, of course, is described as a wild tiger trapped among a helpless herd. So, what big themes come up in Book 9? Well, first things that I want to touch on is this idea of Greek and Roman heroism. So, obviously, in the Iliad, you've studied what a Greek hero is. And in OCR, in the specification, it specifically says that you've got to understand the concepts, the values, and the behaviours of a Greek hero and a Roman hero. And they take pains there to separate the two because they are two separate things. If, in an essay, you get asked about heroism, you want to take time in the introduction to explain whether you are thinking of Greek heroism or Roman heroism. And as a clue, you should always be in the Aeneid, weighing our characters up against what the qualities are of a Roman hero. The idea is Virgil has created a Roman hero out of Greek heroism. He has taken Greek heroism, got rid of all the rubbish stuff, and moulded it into what makes a good Roman. You need to know the difference. I've boiled it down here to a few key concepts, and I'm willing to be corrected on them, and I'm willing to for you to argue them, and that's the whole point. You should be able to argue them in an essay. They're all debatable. Okay, so Greeks versus Roman. Let's go through Greeks first of all. A Greek is motivated by individual glory over the success of the community. You can argue, certainly in the Iliad, that there are moments of community. I would say that those are notable in how unusual they are. So you could look at Book 17 when they fight over the body of Patroclus, You could look at book 23 when we have the funeral games. Those are moments of community, but I would say that they are unusual and remarkable rather than the usual business of sort of looking after your own individual glory. The other common argument against this is, what about Hector? Hector's so motivated by his city. He's such a family man. He's so dreamy. I love Hector. No. He ultimately chooses glory. He chooses glory in book 18, where he ignores Polydamas's advice to retreat back into Troy. And in book 22, he considers approaching Achilles. He considers trying to get back into the city walls before he has to fight Achilles. But he ultimately says, I'm going to die in a glorious way. I'm not going to sell my life cheaply. So on the whole, Greeks think about their individual glory. They take and wear their gerras, their war spoils, as a sign of glory. And they are ready to bargain their life for kleos. The Homeric Code sort of has this notion of your life is worth your kleos. So you have to sacrifice your life in order to get that everlasting glory. And for a Greek hero, that's worth it. It is worth that, like, X equals Y. I'm willing to give up my life if I end up winning myself eternal glory. So we see this type of hero, this type of Greek hero, really clearly in Book 2 of the Aeneid, where we see Aeneas running around Troy, trying to barter his life for glory. That is him being a Greek or Homeric hero, entering war in vain. He eventually has many interventions and escapes Troy. And Virgil deliberately uses Book 2 as a flashback to show us sort of old Aeneas, bad Aeneas, Homeric Aeneas, so that we can note his character development throughout the poem. If you ever get an Aeneas essay and you don't talk about his character development, you, my friend, are a silly sausage. So, what does it take to be a Roman hero? In contrast to a Greek hero, they prioritise generally the success of the community and the army over individual glory. If you think of the Roman Empire had to have one of the best armies in the world. In order to do that, you can't have one gung-ho person that's sort of a maverick and rushes into battle left, right, and centre. You have to be an organised troop. You have to be an organised army. And so it's sort of the notion of the collective over the individual. Obviously, also, when you go to war as a Roman, supposedly, you have the sanctioning and the backing of the Senate and the people of Rome, SPQR. If we look back to book 8, you see that Augustus had the backing of the Senate and the people of Rome. So whenever you go into war, you're going into war for your people and with their backing. In contrast to a Greek hero, a Roman hero nails gerras to their temple as a thank offering to the gods. We see Aeneas do this in book 3, not one of his prescribed books, but certainly one that we went over. If you don't do this, if you decide to wear your gerras, as we will see with Euryalus, it doesn't end particularly well for you. And that's an important message because it also will be what undoes Turnus in the end as well. And then finally, a Roman hero will fight a righteous war in defense of their homeland. This was really clearly laid out in book 6 by Anchises. This is, interestingly, though, it's what Turnus is doing, right? He's defending his homeland. He's had this invading force. And we are always supposed to admire and respect Turnus's decision to defend his homeland. That is a good person, is a good action, is a good enemy. However, we are supposed to respect and admire Turnus as an enemy. He is a worthy nemesis, and we are not supposed to hate him. There are not necessarily any goodies or baddies. As a scholar called Bob Cowan says, there are no goodies, there are no baddies. We are constantly supposed to think of everybody, especially Aeneas, as a work in progress. So these concepts of Greek and Roman ideology are really played out in the key themes that I'm going to discuss later. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page for them. So keep these concepts in mind as we discuss all of the various characters in Book 9. Are they a Roman hero? Are they a Greek hero? So our first key theme, next key theme, will be furor. So the specification says you need to know moral values that are implicit in the Aeneid, including pietas, that duty to the gods, the state, the family, and its contrast with furor. So furor, reminder, is this uncontrollable passion and emotion. Anyone can have furor, but you need to control it, and it must be sort of righteous and justified anger. If somebody murdered one of your parents, you would be right and justified to be angry about that. But if you are as angry at that as you are at somebody stealing your pen, that is not justified furor. Okay, so anyone can feel it. It's not that you have to completely dismiss furor and you have to be constantly like zen and in control of your emotions. You can have furor, but you need to be able to control it. If you let it take over and you can't control it, it can end up compromising your pietas. You will end up making silly mistakes that will compromise your piety. We've got several examples of this in Book 9, most notably Nissus and Euryalus. So, this is how they are described when they discuss their plan. So Nissus says, my mind has long urged me to rush to battle. So they are not enjoying being kept in a Cupanist camp. They're not enjoying not being able to have this adventure. Apologies, my quotes are taken online, not from the David West translation, so it might look slightly different in your translation, as one of my little rat children stole my book. So Nissus says, my mind has long urged me to rush to battle. And we get Euryalus. He was dazzled, struck by a great desire for glory. So both of these men, when they're discussing their plan, they are motivated by this idea of this sort of quite emotional drive for adventure and glory. Then when Volscens threatens to kill Euryalus, when he's got him, and Nissus is watching, he's sort of hidden in the bushes, this is how Nissus is described. He's described as truly maddened with fear. So when he bursts out and says, no, kill me, his only crime is that he loved the wrong friend too much, and we all cry and we are all weeping in class, Nissus is maddened. So it's again this emotion that overrides your rational actions, thus, of course, leading to their death. Then, of course, we get, as a reaction to that, Euryalus' mother. Now, Euryalus' mum is described as shrieking madly, her hair dishevelled. She ignored the soldiers of danger, the weapons, and she filled the heavens with her lament. She rushes out onto the battlements. She says, strike me, kill me now. And she has this big, long, impassioned speech. I would argue that that is righteous fury. If I had just seen my child's head being paraded around on the ground before me, I would also react in such a way. This is a justified and quite womanly behaviour in the Virgilian world. This is often, furor, remember, is often the domain of women. We see furor very much describing Dido, for example, and her grief is so powerful that it makes the other men waver as well, and they sort of have to take her away because all of the other men, they feel so uncomfortable, and it starts to affect their courage. We're going to discuss Euryalus' mum in a little bit more detail later, but just a reminder for Euryalus' mum, back in book 5, we lost all of the women. We lost all the Trojan women. They stayed. They didn't want to go on any longer, so Aeneas left them behind. We're told that Euryalus' mum was the only woman that went with them, and she didn't want to abandon her son. So she is there as, remember, women represent grief. Women represent the suffering. Euryalus' mum, we're told, is our only representation of suffering and grief because she is our only woman. I would also argue that is made really quite obvious by the fact that she doesn't have a name. She is defined by her relationship to men, and she is defined by her relationship to her son, who she then loses. So her name is Euryalus' mother. Is she even a mother anymore? She is definitely a character to mention in a women essay, but I haven't made a particular slide on women because she's the only woman that actually really appears in book 9. So moving on, we get Pandarus and Bitias. What fools. So they not only ignore Aeneas' warnings to stay within the walls, but when Pandarus sees that Bitias has died, firstly, this is how he reacts. So great Pandarus sprang forward, blazing with anger at his brother's death. Pandarus is also a moron because he realises his brother has died, shuts the gate, which not only, number one, leaves Turnus shut inside with them, number two, leaves all his men abandoned outside to slaughter. So Pandarus and Bitias are, quite frankly, morons, motivated by this desire to fight, motivated by this desire that, do you know what, I actually could get outside the walls, I could win, I trust in myself, this sort of, almost I would go as far as to say that this hubris that they have, and they don't realise that, and then they die as a result. And Pandarus gets one of the best deaths ever, where he gets his skull split in half and his brains plop out and his two sides of his skull sit on either shoulder. What a brilliant death. One quite deserved from such an idiot. And then our other key guy for furor, of course, throughout is Turnus. So when Turnus even arrives at the camp at the very start of the book and he can't get in, he is bursting in anger. He's compared to a wolf. The Rutulians' anger was alight and indignation burned. We quite often, if you are describing furor, we quite often get this fire imagery. It's described as sort of burning inside, even eating it. Here we get this harsh marrow. So remember, the marrow is the inside of your bones. So you feel it really within. It's very visceral imagery. Obviously, his furor leads him to parade Nissus and Euryalus' head on spikes, mistreat the bodies of his enemies. Not a very good thing. This is where perhaps his furor is compromising his pietas, his sort of dedication to the gods. I'm going to talk about Turnus in more detail in just a second. We get this continual lexis surrounding his anger, and when he enters the camp, he is a tiger. So we get this savage fury, we get him burning with passion, and then he is this tiger. He's animalistic. He's an animalistic predator among the helpless herd. But the key moment for Turnus in book 9 is this, where Virgil takes time, once he enters into the camp and the gates are closed and he's shut inside the camp with all the Trojans, Virgil takes pains to note the fact that if Turnus had thought to turn around and open the gate and let his men in, the war would have ended then. So he gives this potential, this hypothetical. Turnus could have just stopped for a second, thought about it, and won the war. But instead, we get rage and insane desire for slaughter. So it is this furor that drives him on and actually really makes this key mistake here, that he doesn't let his men into the camp. He instead is so driven on by this individualistic glory and desire for slaughter. Think back to that Greek versus Roman hero. And if we have a look, unpack Turnus's character a little bit more in book 9, because this is really where I think he comes into his own a little bit. So book 9, book 10, book 11, book 12, we really see Turnus on the battlefield. We start to feel quite sorry for him later on in the poem, but at the moment, is he a hero? Can we think of him as a hero? And remember, you might get a Turnus essay. There was one last year, if I'm honest with you, so it might not come up again, but that's where we fall into the characterization of major and minor characters. So remember, probably for a 20 marker, any of these characters, you could get an essay just on their character, and then you would have to analyze them. So I'm thinking Turnus, Anchises, Aeneas, Dido. I would suggest maybe Pallas and Evander. We haven't had something like that, so perhaps something like that. So is he heroic? Let's put out what we've got. So in book 9, we see he's favoured by the gods. The gods give him help. They come down and support him. They do abandon him in the camp so that he won't drive on and sort of keep slaughtering. They allow him to escape the camp at the very end of the book, because Juno realises that that's not what the gods wanted. So he's favoured by the gods, but more importantly, he gives thanks when they help him. So at the very start of the book, when Iris comes down, he then gives thanks. So he shows that pietas. He leads his men to the Trojan camp. He is first among his men. He rides ahead of them, throws a big javelin. He urges them on. Also, when the ships get burst into nymphs, everybody else is amazed, dumbstruck, dumbfounded, can't think properly. And it says that Turnus's confidence never wavered. He didn't care. He goes on to then give a big speech in which he tells everybody how he is better than the Greeks. He's going to attack them openly. There's not going to be years of fighting. There's not going to be a 10-year war. He's not going to hide like a coward in the belly of a horse. He is going to attack them openly and destroy them like that. So he gives a rousing speech. And remember, speech is a really key heroic trait as well. And this fires on his men. He's able to motivate his men, rally them. Very much a heroic trait. And he does excel in battle. So book 9, you really see him on a murderous rampage. Like I said before, perhaps to his detriment, perhaps too much, perhaps he gets distracted by war, love of glory, and he forgets himself a little bit. And then my last thing, youth, heroism, war. OCR says you need to understand the portrayal of war and obviously the concepts and behaviours of Greek and Roman hero. There is a particular youth twist to this that I will focus on, like I said back in the book 8 video, really comes out in the book 9 video. So obviously we get Euryalus, his youth is emphasised by the fact that his mum is there. He's so young. We get told that he just has the first bloom of a beard on his cheek. So he's so young that his mum has come with him into battle. He also has this real drive for glory. He's got such a desire for glory. He's willing to exchange his life for glory, and that is this sort of youthful rashness where they still believe in this Homeric concept of my life is worth glory. I am willing to sacrifice my life in war. This relationship that he has with his mum gives us a grieving scene where we see the impact of war on parents. And remember, actually, family and friends is also a theme that comes up. I should have included that. Remember back in book 8, Evander says to Pallas, look, if you're going to die now, I'd rather just be dead right now. Kill me now if you're going to die. Which obviously makes us think, oh, that's not very good, is it? You've cursed it now, you've jinxed it. So we get that relationship introduced in book 8. In book 9, we see it sort of reflected in Euryalus and his relationship with his mum. In book 10, Pallas is going to die. In book 11, we're going to see Evander's reaction. So we get this sort of, all 4 books talk to each other in terms of the impact of war on those left behind, the impact of war on family and friends, particularly when a young person dies and their parents outlive them, and that sort of tragedy that we see there. So keep that in mind, particularly if you've got a war essay, I would definitely be talking about the youth and its impact, the impact of their death on their parents. And then our final youth that I want to talk about is Ascanius. So Ascanius, obviously Aeneas is absent here, and this is a good opportunity for Ascanius to really step up and take the position of his dad. And he does that in the council. He's there among the council of elders. When Nissus and Euryalus come to him with a plan, he's the one that says, yep, go for it, I will. And he offers them all of the geras. He understands how to conduct himself in the assembly and in the council. He is a good diplomatic leader of his people. He also gets his first kill in book 9. We get told that he's also, it's justified, okay? So Numanus is having such boastful words and dire warnings, and before he sends his arrow out, he first prayed humbly to Jove. Remember, Jove is Jupiter, so he's pious, he's respectful to the gods in his war, in his first kill. Okay, so this first kill, because he prayed to the gods, it's almost sanctioned by the gods, where they say, yeah, go for it, mate, you can have your first kill. Then the gods intervene again. Apollo comes down in the disguise of old booties, and he talks to them, talks to the elders, and the elders stop Ascanius. And Ascanius is described still as eager for the fight, hungry for battle. But Ascanius gets told, no more. Your whole priority now is going to be peace. And it's the responsibility of the elders and those older than Ascanius. They themselves return to battle, openly putting their lives at risk. Obviously, we cannot have Ascanius dying because he is the future of Rome. So he now has to be protected. He can't go into war. He's got his first kill, so he's become a man. His balls have dropped. That's it. You're done. Now you need to go and hide so you can't be hit, so that you can't be killed. It also represents, if we think symbolically about this, he represents the future of Rome. The future of Rome is what Apollo tells us is now going to be peaceful. It cannot be warmongering. It is peaceful. Ascanius in this position perhaps is starting to reflect a little bit of Augustus. Remember, he's demonstrating himself as the bringer of peace. Now, before we end, I'm just going to leave you with David West's quote. As you've read your introduction, of course, this is, I think, the final paragraph of his introduction to Book 9. In terms of how to think of Nissus and Euryalus, I want you to be thinking, is it that they are a cautionary tale, or is it that they are moral exemplars? And David West sort of sits in the middle. He says that Virgil praises their ardour, their courage, their love, but they have this weakness of youth, their lack of judgment, their lack of discipline, their lack of piety. And they, in that contrast, they are the foil to Aeneas. Aeneas has that, all of those things in bountiful quantities. He is pious, he is thoughtful. Remember, his thoughts are constantly running this way and that. He's constantly thinking, he's turning over those thoughts in his mind. He does not have that youthful rashness, and that is what makes a good Roman leader. So those are the qualities of a Roman leader. Those are the themes that come up in Book 9. Any questions, do let me know.